We had asked you to submit your questions yesterday, and quite a few of you have done that. So the AADs from each region will be distributing the questions. When we call out your name and introduce you, kindly stand up, and we will ask Dr. Misner to answer the questions. At the end of it, if there is some time, we'll have an open session where you can ask whatever's come up to you in the middle. Is that okay? Yeah, super. One request, just to make sure that we finish on time. Please do not introduce yourself. Your introduction will be done by the AAD who's taking that question. Is that okay? Perfect.
I just want to say just one or two things really quickly. First of all, it's great being back to India. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm incredibly proud of BNI India, and I'm incredibly proud of BNI Mumbai. You guys are doing an incredible job here. So I have just a little bit of good news and a little bit of bad news. Here's the good news. I mentioned to you that we now, on my Facebook page, have more followers from India than any other country, including the United States. So here's some more good news. I have more followers from Mumbai than I do from Bangalore. Yeah. Now, here's a little bit of bad news. I have more followers in Delhi than I do in Mumbai. Oh, so this is Mumbai. You need more, I need more followers from Mumbai than Delhi. Okay, all right, good. So it's great to be here. This is an Ask the Founder event, and I'm going to try to answer any question you have. The only dumb question is the unasked question. I know you took some questions, so I'm ready.
Can we begin with a huge round of applause for Dr. Misner? Okay, Dr. Misner, we start with a couple of questions on the all-important question of quality versus quantity.
Yeah.
Yeah. The first question is from Pankaj Patel, who's from the Energizers chapter and is a launch DC. And along with him, I'd also like to ask Anush Kanga to stand up. He's from chapter Odyssey. He's a support DC. The first one is, when launching a chapter, how does one reconcile the dilemma of quality members over quantity, given that there's always a need to launch a chapter quickly? And the related question that Anush had was, with BNI growing at a really fast pace, should there be more stringent checks in place to make sure the quality of members is maintained?
So both quality and quantity are important, no question about it. However, quality is king. It is so important to have quality members. Now, what does quality members mean? To me, quality is aptitude and attitude. You want people who are good at what they do, and you want people who have the right attitude. And oftentimes we pick people just based on how good they are at what they do, but we don't think about, do they have the right attitude to fit in BNI? Do they come to the chapter with lots of drama? Are they cooperative? Do they believe in giver's gain? Are they the right kind of member? And so quality includes both aptitude as well as attitude. And if I had to pick between the two, I would rather have a chapter that's a little smaller that has a lot of great members than a huge chapter that has marginal members. And so quality is really, really important in creating a chapter that's successful. I mean, if you could have 100 members, but if 30 members are not very good, then you basically have a 70-member chapter there. So I would strive to always have high quality. Now, the second part of that was, how do you ensure that you have high quality? So there are a number of things. First of all, the referral part of the process is important. Members should be inviting, for the most part, someone they know. Now, you don't always do that. I invited sometimes people that I didn't know well, but for the most part, you should be inviting people that you know. And if someone has brought in 2 or 3 members, and all of those members are great members, then you don't have to do a lot of background check on the person. But if somebody's been invited and no one really knows them well, then you have to check all the references. You have to go deeper in making sure that that person is a quality business professional. But the truth is, you can do, in a US context, you could do an FBI check on someone and not know everything there is, and sometimes good people go bad. I've seen people who went through a divorce and then their business started falling apart. So you have to have a strong membership committee in place. And that membership committee has to ensure the quality of the chapter. So you do a good job of screening, bringing in quality people, and then have a strong membership committee who can follow through to ensure that you're keeping quality members. Why accept mediocrity when excellence is an option? Excellence is always an option with a chapter. Great question, thank you. What else?
So we are really lucky to have you here. Thank you so much. And I'm going to request Rajshri Ojale and Vipul Bondal, who are support DCs, to stand up, please. Also Suresh Pukale, who is a support ambassador. Can you please stand up? These are questions from them. I'm going to combine these questions. It's a little bit of continuation from what you actually spoke during the press conference. So the question is, what is your ultimate dream for BNI-1 Mumbai, which you partially answered, if you can also elaborate on that. The continuing questions are, how do you see individual DCs contributing to this dream? You know, what would be your thought process? How can we contribute? And in terms of when we are contributing towards this growth in the next 5 years, is the business generated more important than member growth, or is it vice versa?
So they're somewhat different questions. Give me that second piece again.
Yeah, so the question is that when we are growing, which is more important to look at? Is the business generated for the members, or do we focus on member growth?
So that was the third question. I'll tackle with that. When you have more members in a chapter, quality members, you're going to be generating more business. So they're inextricably tied. When you double a chapter from 20 members to 40 members, you triple the number of referrals. So if you have a 30-member chapter and you triple that to 90 members, you have a 40-member chapter and you double it to 80, you triple the referrals. So what we have seen historically is that the number of members in a chapter does make a difference in the amount of referrals and the amount of thank you for closed business. Now, one of the reasons for that is that the more members you have in a chapter, the more you have power teams created. When you have a really strong power team in a chapter, it is a force multiplier to the chapter. Because a good power team, you might have one referral, but it can go to 3 or 4 people. For example, if you know someone who's getting married, that one referral can go to the photographer, it can go to the travel agent, it can go to the florist, it can go to multiple people. So the number of people in a chapter is, I think, extremely important and inextricably tied to the amount of business that's generated. Now there is another piece or two there.
The other two questions are your vision for BNI-1 Mumbai, and how do you see an individual DC, how can he contribute in a big way?
So what you have been doing here in Mumbai, I think, is very smart. You've been really focusing on the city being one part of the same organization. From what I understood in the past, it was maybe a little more separated out. Working together as a team is the only way to build an organization. It's always the best way to build an organization. And for DCs, director consultants, I think director consultants are probably, honestly, the most important element of BNI, because you are meeting with members week in and week out. Every week, you have the opportunity to make a bigger difference in people's lives than anyone else. You may not believe this, but I believe this. You will make a bigger difference in people's lives than I can in BNI, because I come in, I do a presentation, I leave, I may not be back for several years. You're there week in and week out, coaching people, supporting people, helping them be successful. I truly believe that director consultants are the most important element of the BNI organization. We all have people who are in our story, people who've made a difference in our lives. Oftentimes they're a teacher, they may be a friend, but they're a mentor to us. They help us somehow. And so they're in our story. But to me, what's more important than who's in my story is whose story are you in? Whose story are you in? Whose life have you changed? Who have you helped? And I have seen directors in this organization help so many people that you are in people's story. And that should be your goal. is to be in people's story, to make a difference in other people's lives so that the work you've done has made a change for them. The work here in BNI has made a change for them. So I see director consultants as the most important element of the BNI organization, and that means executive directors need to pour into director consultants and help the director consultants learn how to, in fact, coach and guide members even more effectively. Great questions.
Yes.
So the next set of questions, the first question is from Suchitra Rana. And I would also like to ask Gautam Burkhe to stand, please. So Suchitra is a member of HERA chapter and she's a launch ambassador, new baby there. And Gautam Burkhe is from Enrich chapter and he's a director consultant. So the first question from Suchitra Rana is that you have already 7 core values for BNI, because of which BNI what is there today. If you have to share 3 more core values, what would they be? And the second question similar on that ground is that what are the essential and important steps to build the right culture for the chapter? How can we rebuild the culture for a 7 to 10-year-old chapters?
Okay, so let's start with the first one. What 3 would I add? None. I wouldn't. I think these 7 core values are really good, and we have added 2 or 3 into the core values a few years ago. And so those 7 core values, I think, are solid. I wouldn't mess with them at all. Give me the second question. Give them to me one at a time, because yeah.
The second question is that what are the essential and important steps to build the right culture for the chapter? How can we rebuild the culture?
So that's a third question. So let me. What are the important steps to build the culture? Right. So the answer to that is the core values. You see, here's how a culture is created in any organization. It starts with the organization's traditions. Okay? Now, how do you come up with traditions? Practices in an organization, the things that people do regularly that are successful become the traditions of an organization. So successful practices create traditions. Traditions create core values, and core values create culture. Now, we've had a lot of practices. We early on realized what worked, what didn't work. So we created traditions, and from those traditions, we created the 7 core values. So the secret to creating a healthy culture is to focus on the core values. It's always coming back to the core values. So how do you do that in a chapter? One of the things I'd recommend is that at every chapter meeting, not forever, but periodically, cycle through the process where you have one member each week talk about a core value that they like the most or that has really affected them the most. One of the things I love about what Graham Weimiller has done, the CEO in BNI, is that he starts every single management meeting, every single staff meeting with one person talking about a core value. And I think if a chapter does that same kind of thing, let's say the chapter doesn't quite get the core values, do that for 7 weeks in a row. Somebody stand up and talk about one, then the next week talk about another, and why it's important to that individual. That helps to create a focus on the core on the culture. So if you're focusing on the core values, you create a healthy culture. That's my recommendation. Yeah.
Third question is that how can we rebuild the culture of a 7 to 10-year-old chapter?
So every single chapter I have ever seen goes through cycles. If you're around for 7 to 10 years, you've gone through several cycles. Here's how I like to define the cycles. As a rule, chapters are either on fire, on hold, or in a hole. They're on fire, on hold, or in a hole. And Elizabeth and I have written about this in an article about chapter cycles. So the thing to do is every now and then a chapter needs to do a self-evaluation. Where are we? Where are we in this process? Are we on fire, or are we just kind of going through the motions? When I say on hold, the chapter's just kind of going through the motions. They're not excited. They're not passionate about what they're doing. And we know chapters that are in a hole. They're struggling. The problem is that sometimes chapters that are in a hole, they don't recognize it. Sometimes they're happy in that hole and they don't want out. You know, you give them a ladder, they don't want to take it. And so you've got to help them recognize where they are at. And so doing a self-assessment, you know, where is our chapter? Are we, on a scale from 1 to 10, how strong are we at different elements? And when they realize that they're not really strong on many areas, that's when you get the chapter to pull themselves back up and be more successful. There's a podcast that I've done on this. Look for On Fire, On Hold, and In a Hole on a podcast, and you'll find it, and I talk about some things that you can do there. What I would love to see is every chapter on fire. Every chapter on fire. And if you get chapters that are on fire and excited, they're passionate. If they're passionate, they're engaged. If they're engaged, they're going to be way more successful. Okay?
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Give me one of them at a time.
Sure, sure.
Yeah, thanks. Go ahead.
Okay. Dr. Misner, the next question is from Huzaifa Barot, if I can ask you to stand, please. He's a member of the BNI Glory chapter, and he's a support director for 2 chapters, BNI Wizards and BNI Hive. His question is, how can we change the mindset of members to a growth mindset, where they believe that each and every small thing that they do for a chapter and for BNI can lead to both personal and the chapter's healthy growth?
That's great. That's a super question. So would you like to know the secret to motivation? How do you motivate people? You can't. I can't motivate anyone. They have to motivate themselves. Now, we have a shot at inspiring someone to motivate themselves, but they still have to motivate themselves. And the way to help them get themselves motivated is to always understand that people don't care about how until they understand why. No one's going to get motivated to change their behavior until they understand why. When they understand why, then it's easier for them to get motivated about doing that. I mean, you could pick almost any subject. Attendance. I meet people and, they don't think they have to be there regularly. And so then if you show them the data, there is data on attendance, that there is a direct and dramatic linear correlation between attendance and referrals. That the more someone attends, the more referrals they pass. And when you have a chapter, that as a chapter, it has regular attendance, their referrals are going to go up. And so I have talked to chapters where I've shown them the data. As a matter of fact, years ago, there's probably a podcast on this where I talk about years ago, this one chapter came to me. It's a true story. One chapter comes to me and says, Ivan, we don't think attendance makes any difference at all. None at all. And so if we can show you, our chapter's attendance is not good, but if we can show you that it doesn't make a difference or not, would you be willing to go to the Board of Advisors and change our attendance policy? And I said yes. And so they cleaned up their attendance. They had a 50% improvement in attendance. Guess how much their referrals went up? 60%. When they improved their attendance by 50%, their referrals went up by 60%. True story. Then I had a chapter call me when they saw me, I published that. They said, we don't believe that data. We don't believe it. I said, call the president, ask him. He'll tell you. He said, the president's in your pocket. He'll do whatever you say. I'm like, man, you don't know this organization. That's just not true. No, this was years ago. And so he said, we want to do it too, but we want to do it longer. And we're going to show you that if we do it longer, it's not going to be the same. And I said, okay, do it longer. So they were going to do it 6 months longer. 3 months longer, he called me up and he said, so our absenteeism has improved. We have a 50% increase in attendance as well. But 3 months longer, we had a 164% increase in referrals. So he said, never mind, we're not going to finish this for the 12 months. Clearly, there's a difference. So he got the why. When people get the why, smart business people, when they get the why, they motivate themselves to make the change. Then they're receptive to how. But if you just start telling people how to do something different, they're not going to do it because they're not motivated, and you're not going to motivate them. But you can inspire them to get motivated. Does that make sense? Good, thanks.
Thank you. Dr. Meisner, the next question is by Kiran Zende. Kiran, if I can have you stand, please. He's a member of Impeccable Chapter and he's a training ambassador. His question is, what are the characteristics of a vibrant BNI chapter?
Well, that's a great question. I think what you want to look for are chapters, you know that they're on fire when they're excited, when they're following the system. To me, a great chapter is a chapter that I walk into, they're not just going through the motions, but they're following every piece of the meeting, but they're doing it passionately. They're excited. I know I'm at a great chapter when I see a well-run meeting and I walk out of the meeting and my cheeks hurt from smiling so much, because everyone is so engaged in the process and there's laughter and there's fun. It's important to keep the fun in the fundamentals. I know I'm in a chapter that's on hold when they're just kind of going through the motions, there's not a lot of excitement. And I know I'm in a chapter that's in a hole when they spend a large part of the meeting or before or after the meeting complaining. Sometimes people complain as though it's an Olympic event. It's not. I looked. Complaining is not an Olympic event. So you know that the chapter is really, really doing well when they're following the system and you walk out and your cheeks hurt from laughing so much. Does that answer your question? Yep, good, thanks.
Next question is from Nikhil Kothare. See, he's the senior director consultant, and the question is, what are some of the best practices you have come across that support DCs follow in other countries? Which is one practice that either shocked you or impressed you?
Practices that DCs are doing in other countries. So there have been a lot over the years, but most of those have been incorporated into BNI. So the ones that really truly impress me are the ones that you're probably seeing in BNI. There are things like the education coordinator. When I started BNI, that was not part of our agenda. The time for someone to stand up and give some educational moments, that wasn't part of it. And I had a director in Arizona actually come to me and say, this is after I'd written a few books, he said, we need time at the meetings. This is before the podcast. We need time at the meetings to be able to share this information. And when I watched that happen, it absolutely changed how I viewed what we were doing, and so we incorporated that in. But other things like the referral reality check, where you're asking about the quality of a referral, that was an idea that came from a local chapter. The idea of taking the visitor out of the meeting and sitting with them and doing an orientation, that came from a local chapter. And these individual chapters got them approved. They didn't just do these things, but they got them approved by the national director. The national director tested it, and those things now are part of BNI worldwide. And so those are the kinds of things that I've seen that impresses me. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the question. The next question is from Dr. Ajinkya Raut. The question is, he's a support director again for a chapter called BNI Magic. The question is, there are phases that a chapter goes through. What would you suggest to liven up a chapter that has become complacent?
So there's a few things you can do. One is I recommend the meeting stimulants. Now, I'm not talking about good drugs. These are exercises that the chapters can do, and they help get the chapters kind of motivated in a way. They get them a little bit excited. Doesn't happen overnight, and I would not do them every week. I would not do a meeting stimulant every week. I would introduce meeting stimulants like once every 3 or 4 weeks, and eventually maybe once every 2 months. But if you want to get them excited, then do meeting stimulants like every 3 weeks or so, just to get them going. So one of the first meeting stimulants that we saw was the cards in a basket. And this was years ago, we saw this. And cards in a basket, are you all familiar with that one? Everyone puts the business card in a basket, and they do they pull a card out, and whoever's card they pull, they do that person's weekly presentation. So this particular chapter, the woman who pulled out the card, she was a bookkeeper, and she was about 4'2". She pulled out the business card of one of the members who was an ex-college basketball player in the US, and he was about 6'7". So the first thing she did when she pulled out the card was she kind of laughed, then she pulled out her chair, she stood on her chair and did, I know the photographers always love this one, and did his weekly presentation. The chapter was in hysterics. They loved it. And she kind of used his mannerisms and kind of talked like him. And I'm telling you, everybody walked out of that meeting with their cheeks hurting because they had a blast at that meeting. It was fun. But there are other meeting stimulants that I think are really, really good. Some are challenging, some aren't. One of the meeting stimulants is, what is a trend in your industry? That's one of the meeting stimulants. That's not hard. What's something going on in your business that's a trend that we would like to know about? Then there are others that are a little bit more of a challenge, like the NET radio. And I love this one. You cannot walk out of a meeting without a big smile. NET radio, the president of the chapter is the DJ. Every person has however long you have to give your weekly presentation. So let's say it's 30 seconds. Every person is giving a 30-second radio commercial. And it's 30 seconds, not 35, not 25, not 20, it's 30 seconds. So if you finish your commercial in 20 seconds, you've got 10 seconds of dead air. That's 10 seconds. So you get everybody to really time their presentations. I saw some of the funniest presentations I have ever seen in my life at this chapter. One of them was man on the street interviews, where somebody had a microphone, he had a fake mic, it wasn't real, and he did these interviews with people that had used his body shop. It was an automobile body shop, it was called Joe's Auto Body. And so he picked BNI members who had used his body shop, and so he just did it like he was on an interview. Hey, this is Joe with Joe's Auto Body, and I'm here today talking with people who've used Joe's Auto Body. Tell me about your experience. And then he would do this like microphone, and they'd say, I love Joe's Auto Body because, I took in my car and it was a disaster, and he completely fixed it. It looks better than new. And he did this whole thing exactly 30 seconds. People were laughing, having a blast. That one's a challenge. Oh, and just in case people ended early, they had what's called bumper music. So they would come in with just a little bit of music so that they would finish the 5 or 10 seconds with a little bit of music. Some did jingles where they sang a song. I mean, it was so creative. That chapter walked out having a blast. And so I would recommend things like the meeting stimulants. Yeah.
Thank you so much for those questions. Over to you, Naresh.
So the next question is from Samir Talpade. He's a member of BNI Evolve, and he's a support director supporting Incredibles. His question is, when networking up, is there any position that's too high to connect, or any position one shouldn't try to network with unless you reach a certain level?
The answer is no. You should absolutely, you can network up all the time. The thing is, when you're networking up, and the idea with networking up is that you're networking with somebody who you believe to be more successful than you are. And I don't think you should let somebody else's success limit you in terms of your ability to network up. The thing that is done wrong generally in networking up is that people say to themselves, I'm never going to have an opportunity again to talk to this person, so I'm going to pitch them on my product or service. And so they try to sell to them. And I've been with some incredibly successful people, and I've just watched people shoot themselves in the foot by trying to sell before there was any kind of relationship. One of my favorite ones was a guy who was trying to sell credit card merchant services to Richard Branson. It's like, Branson's not even involved in the day-to-day management of the company, and the guy was just kind of escorted aside because he's pitching Richard on credit cards instead of making a connection. And so when you're networking up, what you want to do is find opportunities to be able to add value to that individual. And if you can find a way to add value, and I talk about this, and if you go to, I know I did a podcast on networking up, if you can find a way to add value to that person, you'll be able to stay in touch with them. Okay, great question.
Yeah, the next question is from Pankaj Pitale. Can you stand up, please? Yeah, Pankaj is just going to take up support ambassador. He's just out of training and he'll start next week as a support ambassador. His question is, one of the biggest challenges we face is getting visitors. People already know about BNI or they have visited another chapter. Do you have examples from other countries like US and UK, how they address this challenge?
So I'm hearing two things there. How do you invite visitors, but what about people that have already heard about BNI? So let me deal with the second one first. BNI is not for everyone. It's not for everyone. And so don't feel bad if someone says I've heard about BNI, I don't want to come, or I've been to other chapters, I don't want to come. BNI is absolutely not for everyone. I used to be very good at talking people into joining BNI, but they would join and then they weren't committed. So they made a really bad member. And it surprises people to hear the founder of BNI say, this isn't for everyone. It's also not for everyone at that particular moment. I met a woman a few years ago, and she said, I've been a member of my chapter now for almost 10 years. It's been amazing. But I met you 32 years ago. And I said, tell me about that. She said, I met you at a kickoff. You did a kickoff in Los Angeles. Now, she was in Florida when I met her the second time. She said, I met you in Los Angeles when you did a kickoff. And she said, I wish you would have convinced me to join. I didn't join BNI 32 years ago. And I wish you could have convinced me to do it because my business went out of business. And so I feel bad that I didn't join because I think I would have been successful. And I said, don't feel bad because you weren't ready. If you didn't want to join, you weren't ready. You weren't ready to make that commitment. It's a big commitment. And so she said, well, that's interesting you say that because I ended up going to work for someone else. I worked for someone else for probably close to 10 years and decided I wanted to go back into business, and I remembered BNI, and I joined. And I said, you were ready. So not everybody's ready. It takes a commitment. And so I wouldn't worry about that. Now, how do I recommend you invite people? I recommend you do the We're Interviewing technique. I definitely have this as a podcast. We're Interviewing. And it basically goes like this. I'm in a referral group. We get together on a regular basis. We are interviewing, and then whatever profession you're looking for. We're interviewing bankers right now to find a really good bank that we could give all of our referrals to. I think you might make a good candidate. Now, that flips the whole process around because generally what happens is we beg people to come. Oh, no, you got to come, try it out, see what you think. It's really good, I promise you. And so we're begging people to join BNI. You don't have to beg anyone to come to BNI. You're doing them a favor when you invite them to BNI. They're not doing you a favor by coming. So I love the We're Interviewing technique because it flips it. We're interviewing. I think you might make a good candidate. What's the subtext? The subtext is we might not pick you. Entrepreneurs hate not being picked. They want to be picked. And so if they say, well, no, it's, meets too often, and by the way, I don't even tell them how often it meets. I just say, come to a meeting, bring plenty of business cards. Now, they'll ask a lot of questions. My advice is, you got to come to a meeting. And here's why. When I started BNI 35 years ago, I had no material. None. All I had was a one-page agenda that I typed up on an IBM Selectric typewriter. Do you remember those? The millennials in the room are probably going, what is that, right? It's basically today an Anchor. I mean, it was just big and heavy. And back then I typed Columbus style, seek out and discover, right? And so I typed up the agenda. That's it. I had no marketing material, no brochures, no visitor information sheets, no news article reprints. I didn't have anything. People would say to me, do you have any material? I say, no, come to a meeting. You got to see it. If I gave you material, it wouldn't tell you anything. And if they really pressured me, I showed them an agenda. And they said, well, this doesn't really tell me about the meeting. I said, no, that's why you have to come. Come to the meeting. I opened 20 chapters by myself in 1 year with no material. and no internet. There was no internet in 1985. And I opened 20 chapters, and it was just by saying, you got to come and see what it's like. And if they come and they don't want to participate, then they're not ready. It's not a good fit, and that's okay. But I think the secret is to say we're interviewing, and then interview them. Don't just say it, interview them. I have another podcast on what you can do I don't remember the podcast number, but the kinds of questions you can ask. And remember, it's an interview, not an interrogation. There's a lot of questions that I put in there. Don't ask them all, but you get a feel for it. Now, if they say, no, I'm too busy, it's too much, whatever. Here's what now you say this very tactfully. I understand, listen, BNI, it takes a commitment. Can you recommend a really good banker in the area that we could give all of our referrals to? That gets their attention. And you know what I found? Is that many times they'll say, oh, well, I can't do it, but I've got someone in my branch that I think would really benefit from this, and they'll refer one of their people. Because they know you're going to pick a bank. And if it's not their bank, then they're losing out, so they'll send someone else. We're interviewing, and then listen to the follow-up podcast on actual sample interview questions. Great question. Thank you.
So the next question is from Farzana Suri. She's a member of Soul and a director consultant from Mumbai West. Her question is that BNI chapters in India are growing. The 75 plus chapters have a challenge of networking with themselves. So what do you suggest a member can do to get know all members?
Oh, one-to-ones. You have to do one-to-ones. It's so incredibly important to have that face time with one person. Now, people, they say, well, one person, it's a lot of time. Can I do a 5-to-1, a 10-to-1? No, that's not a one-to-one. A one-to-one is one person talking to one other person. I think those are really important because it gives you an opportunity to go deep and learn more about that individual. Now, you got to do the one-to-one right. So, say, look, we're going to set up an hour to talk. You can have the first 30 minutes. I'll take the next 30 minutes. I also recommend that you do a gains exchange. You all know what the gains exchange is. I first wrote about it in a book called Business by Referral. Goals, accomplishments, interests, networks, and skills. Why those things? We have found that when people find overlapping areas of interest, all of a sudden a relationship is started. You start to create a business relationship by finding things that you're both interested in. I tested this out. Tested it out with a chapter in the LA area years ago. When I tested it, I gave this gains exchange to everybody, and I said, fill it out, and I want you to do a one-to-one with somebody else in the group. I had 2 guys that had been in the chapter for a little less than a year, and they didn't know each other very well, and both of them said to me, we don't want to do this. It's silly. And I said, all right, fair enough. Do me a favor, do it, and I'm going to give you a review, and if after the review you think it's silly, just write on there, this was silly, it was a waste of time. They said, okay, fine, but that's what we're going to put. Great. So they did it. They did the one-to-one. They never got through I. They did goals, accomplishments, but they never got past I. Why? Because they found out they were both soccer coaches, football coaches, for their sons' soccer teams. And then that was it. They talked soccer for the rest of the hour. They talked about coaching techniques. They talked about how they coached and how he coached. And then they agreed to go videotape competitors. So, I would videotape and then give it to him, and he would videotape and then give it to me so we could see our competition as we were preparing for each game. They never got past interest. Now, here's the funny thing is, they'd both been in the chapter for about a year, never giving each other any business. Within 3 months, they started referring business to each other. Why? Because there's a relationship. Yeah, good, thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from Deepak Nagar. Deepak is from Chapter Plus and he's support director consultant. His question is, what is the single most important personality attribute of a strongly potential networker?
Okay, so that's a great question. You want the one characteristic of a great networker. All right, here it is. You ready? There is no one characteristic of a great networker. There's always a number of things that you want to look for. I mean, people have strengths and weaknesses. It's like a great leader. A great leader has more than one great characteristic as a leader. And so there are many things that I think make a good networker. One of them is passion. You got to be passionate about the process. I learned years ago when I started BNI that ignorance on fire is better than knowledge on ice. Ignorance on fire is better than knowledge on ice. I can teach someone how to network, but I can't teach them to be positive, to be passionate about what they do. And so I think that's probably one of the more important ones. It's not the only one, but it's probably one of the more important ones. And I'll tell you why. When I started BNI, I didn't know anything about networking. I was clueless how to network. I was 28 years old when I started BNI. Every single member of my chapter was older than me. And I was networking up. You asked, I think, the networking up question. I was networking up. I invited people into the group I started. They were all more successful than me. And I remember one of the very first meetings, we got together and I was like, okay, so what are we going to do? And they said, we don't know. We thought you knew what to do. You're a business consultant. We thought you knew what to do. I had no idea what to do. I made it up as I went. And what worked, I kept. What didn't work, I let go of. And so the passion to me was, I was the poster child for ignorance on fire. I was on fire, but I didn't know what I was doing. I figured it out as I went. And that was the processes that worked. And those processes became traditions, and those traditions became the core values, and the core values create the culture, and culture eats strategy for breakfast in any organization. So I think that the passion is probably one of the most important. And that's why I don't mind when someone comes into BNI and they say, I'm worried about being able to give referrals to others. I'm actually okay with that, because if they're worried, that means they want to. And if they want to, I can teach them how to. So they don't have to know a lot about networking. I don't even care if they're incredibly successful, although you need to have some very successful people in your chapter. But I want passion. I want people that are willing to be coached and are excited about the process. Okay? Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Zubin.
Thank you, Sagar. The next question is from Sanjeev Gupta. If I can have Sanjeev stand, please. Yes. Sanjeev is a part of Soul chapter. His question is for the black badge holders, the Gold Club members.
Yeah.
His question specifically is, can there be any special privilege or group for the Gold Club members on BNI Connect where they can be recognized and they can get connected globally amongst each other?
Yeah, I think that's important. I would like to see that done. It's a little more complicated than I thought, because I suggested that be a badge on everybody's profile, and I think that's probably going to be inevitable. But at this point, it's very, very complicated to add badges in the platform we have. As we're spending more effort on the mobile app, it's actually easier to do that. So I'm in complete agreement with you. I think we need to have notable networkers recognized. I think we need to have the black badge and double black, triple black people that have brought in 18 members or more. They need to be recognized. But we're a little ways off from being able to put that in. The technology is resistant at this point. But it's a great idea, and I agree. Thanks.
The next question is from Rahul Pachigar, who is a support ambassador. And can I request you to stand up, Rahul? Yeah, this is from your quotes and blogs. He requests elaboration on different non-monetary incentive systems for referrals generated by chapter members, which you have described in your blog.
Yes, great question, and I'm glad. Thank you for reading my blog. That's great. So I first wrote about this in the first edition of the world's best-known marketing secret, and you can find one or two of these stories in there. Non-monetary forms of recognizing people that give referrals. Here's one that I experienced myself early in BNI. It was 1985. I went to the BNI chiropractor, and he had on his wall a sign that he could change every month. The sign said, I'd like to thank the following patients for referring patients to me last month. And then he had first name, last initial for confidentiality reasons he couldn't put the last name, but first name, last initial. And I remember looking at that sign and going, I wonder if it works. I wonder if anybody really gives them a referral, just because they're named up there. And I didn't think much of it. Saw the chiropractor, went back a month later. In that period, over the last month, that month, I had referred someone to him. So I walked in, sat down, looked up at the sign. My name was up on the sign. I was like, wow, that's kind of cool. That's me. I wonder if it works. You know, I mean, I give him a referral. I wonder if that, though, really motivates people. Didn't think anything about it. Came back in the next month to see the chiropractor. I looked up on the sign. My name was no longer on the sign. I thought, gee, I wonder who I could refer to get my name back up on that sign. I did. And it hit me. That works. That really works, because I actually looked up there and I thought, gee, you know, what can I do? Who do I know that needs to come to see the chiropractor? So that's a non-monetary form of thanking people for the referral. And I've got other stories. There's a real estate agent in the United States who used to give cash for referrals. And he changed that from cash to a bottle of wine. He lived on a large parcel of land, and he actually would lease out some of his land for winemaking, for growing grapes. And he actually knew how to do a little bit, and he worked with a winemaker to make his own special bottles of wine that had his name on the wine. And you couldn't buy the wine, you could only get it as a gift if you gave him a referral. And so he actually got, and this is in World's Best Known Marketing Secret, he actually got a call one day from a woman he had never met who said, I have a referral for you, and I actually have 2 referrals for you. Can I get 2 bottles of your wine? And he said, well, yes, of course you can, but may I ask, how did you hear about me? She said, oh, I'm sorry. So I was at a friend's house the other night, and he served this wine, and it was really, really good. And I said, where did you buy this? And he said, well, you can't buy it. You got to give this guy a referral, and you'll get a bottle of wine. And so, you know, I have 2. Can I get 2 bottles of wine? So it was very effective. Now, the bottle of wine cost a fraction of what he was giving away in cash. But he told me he'd given away 10 times the number of bottles of wine that he had ever given in cash. Because people just, you know, they weren't motivated. As a matter of fact, he said, I once had somebody say to me, no, I don't want the cash. I need you to do a good job, because this is a good client of mine. I don't want a piece of the action. You just have to do a good job. But he found that most people would take the bottle of wine, thankfully. So lots of different things. Look at World's Best Known Marketing Secret, and you'll find some more. Thanks.
Okay. The next question is from Vilas Mongegar. Vilas is a director consultant trainings. His question is, as per your recent quote, you said, work in your flame, not in your wax. How can we apply this in our professional life?
So the whole idea of working in your flame versus your wax, when you're working in your flame, you're on fire, you're excited, you love what you're doing. People can see it in the way you look, they can hear it in your voice. When you're in your wax, when somebody's in their wax, they're working on the things they just hate to do. And you can see that in the way they act, and you can hear that in their voice. So for me, one of the first things I did to start moving more to my flame and less from my wax was I realized that, I'm sorry, Anna, but bookkeeping, accounting was not my flame. That's good for you, of course, because you get to do that. But it wasn't my flame. One of the first things I did was I hired somebody to do the bookkeeping for me. Okay? Now, here's the beauty of this. Now, I wrote about this, and I know I wrote about it in my blog. One day, this bookkeeper came to me. She was pretty new for me, and she was doing a really good job. And she came to me, and she said, took me 2 hours, but I balanced the books. They were 5 cents off, 5 pennies off. Took me a couple hours, but I balanced it. And I told her, I'm very well done. That's exciting. I'm really proud of you. Well, I told this to somebody. He said, it took her 2 hours, 2 hours to find 5 cents? Did you reprimand her? I said, no. Are you kidding me? I told her that was fantastic. He said, why would you do that? I said, because if it were $50, she wouldn't go home. She would stay there until it was balanced. For me, I would have said $50, close enough. Yeah, that's all right. Why? Because it's my wax. It was her flame. It was her flame. There's no way she wanted to leave until the books were balanced. That's what you want from somebody else. You want people that are in their flame. So as an entrepreneur, what you need to do is to find your flame and try to spend most of your time working in your flame. Surround yourself with people your wax is their flame. If you do that, you create an amazing team. And that's the secret of the flame and the wax. And by the way, it takes a long time. Sometimes you got to do what you got to do to get to do what you want to do. And so I worked in my wax a lot for many, many years, different things that weren't my flame. But my goal always was to be focusing mostly on my flame. By the way, it's taken a while, but I am like 99% in my flame. I do the things now that I love doing, and this is one of them. Having an opportunity to talk to members and to talk to BNI directors is absolutely my flame. Thanks.
So the last question for the day from Sanjeev Akave. He's from Chapter Wizards and is a support director consultant. His question is, what should members in the leadership role need to do good to achieve the regional targets while understanding the ups and down cycles of chapters struggling to grow?
Ooh, how long do we have?
That's why it's the last question.
Well, and I don't know how we are on time, but I'm happy to take questions from the audience if we have more time. So repeat, give it to me one more time.
The question says, what should members in the leadership role need to do good to achieve the regional targets while understanding the ups and down cycles of chapters struggling to grow?
So to reach the regional targets, so first of all, the chapter needs to have its own set of goals for its chapter. You can't hit a target you're not aiming at, so the chapter has to have its own target. Now, one of the things I recommend is you reverse engineer the target. So if you know you want to be at this number of members by the end of the year, or you want to be generating this amount of business by the end of the year, reverse engineer it. So if that's where you're going to be in 12 months, where are you going to be at 11, at 10, at 9, at 8? Where are you going to be at 3, at 2? Where are you going to be at the end of this month? That's what a chapter needs to do, and reverse engineering goals is the way to do that. That means you've got to stay on top of your numbers. What I see companies do, businesses do, I see chapters do, I see regions do, is they set this goal for a year out, and then they're 4 or 5 or 6 months in, and they go, oh, hey, how am I on those goals? Where are those? I know those goals are here somewhere. Oh, yeah, well, here they are. Ooh, I'm not even close. And so they're surprised that they don't hit goals. You got to reverse engineer them, which means you got to know your numbers. You got to look at them daily. I know that as of yesterday, BNI had 9,146 chapters. We had over 260,000 members. I get a daily report, not a monthly report, not a quarterly report. I get a daily report on the number of members and the number of chapters in the organization. And so you have to have that kind of granularity as a chapter in order to achieve the kinds of goals that you want. Now, as you're going along, you have to take a look at, the chapter has to look at what are they doing right and what are they doing wrong. The best chapters in the world can improve in some areas. And so you want to focus on those areas where you could do some improvement. And I would get the leadership team together to brainstorm, what can we do better on this so that we can hit those goals. And of course, chapters that are really struggling, they have difficulty. But here's the interesting thing about chapters really struggling. Pick the top 3 things that you want to do. Top 3 things. If a chapter is really struggling, and they got a list of 14 things they need to do, I would tell them, don't worry about 11 of them yet. Just focus on the top 3 and nail the top 3. Now, what's interesting that I've seen is that if you can get a chapter to fix the top 3 problems in their group, all of a sudden, many of the other 11 come together. And so you don't have to worry about all of the rest. Does that help? Good, thank you.
Over to Naresh.
Doctor, you're good for a few more questions?
Yeah, I'll take
Okay.
until somebody brings a hook and makes me come down.
Oh, that's great. I think that's all we're waiting for. But there's one question which came in. That's from Dr. Chetan Zode. He's a member of BNI Fantastic and is a new support ambassador. His question is, BNI has been a global phenomenon that has actually changed the world, the way the world does business, transforming small and large businesses. And this is something where Beth may want to weigh in as well. What has been the role of BNI Foundation in this process, and what are future projects the foundation can target to undertake?
Well, that's a fantastic question. I definitely would like Elizabeth to respond as well, so maybe we can get a microphone to her. While she's getting that, you heard me say this a little bit earlier. I really think that as a business professional, I have an obligation to put back into the communities that I draw from. I think any organization like BNI, where our philosophy is givers gain, probably has a lot of people who feel the same way. And so we want the foundation to be the vehicle to help accomplish that. And you can do that not only by donating money, but by donating time to causes that, preferably the primary cause of the BNI Foundation, which is children and education. One of the reasons we picked children and education, and it was the Board of Advisors, by the way, that picked this. It wasn't me, it wasn't Beth. We put the Board of Advisors together and said, what's the best topic? Some topics are controversial, but the one thing that the board said, members said, nobody gets upset about helping children in education. And so that's the reason why the foundation focuses on children and education. We've done a lot of stuff here in India, by the way, a lot. As a matter of fact, we're going to be making some contributions while we're here this week to some charitable organizations. So that's my 2 cents. Beth is the person that has run the BNI Foundation for the last 21 years, and the foundation would not be what it is today without her.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Appreciate that. How many of you are coming tomorrow? Most everybody, right? Okay. So Mina and I have a presentation to make. So some of what would answer that question I will hold on to for tomorrow, so you don't have to hear it twice. But something I can share with you that we're not necessarily going to talk about tomorrow is that the BNI Foundation Board, we now have a full-on board of directors, and I'm no longer on the board of directors, although your very own Meena Srinivasan is on the board of directors. We are, as a foundation, moving toward helping other countries who want to have a subsidiary foundation, an NGO or a nonprofit organization of their own in their country to be able to do that. So our board chair, Kevin Barber, has been really busy and doing a wonderful job at meeting with some of the key players in many different countries to open the BNI Foundation as a nonprofit corporation, or however the country sets up those types of development for NGOs, to move the BNI Foundation into many, many other different countries. Right now we have official BNI foundations in Canada, and I'm probably going to not list them all, but Japan, France, and other countries, and we're hoping BNI India will be one of them coming up, because we want you to be able to do fundraising, raising money that will go back into your own projects in your own country, rather than having to donate across the borders and coming into another country and then hoping some of that will come back into you. We want you to be able to do the charitable work right at home. So that's one thing I can share. We will be talking tomorrow more about Business Voices. What is Business Voices? How does it tie in with the BNI Foundation? And what are we hoping to do here in India with our program? So I hope you'll enjoy that presentation tomorrow. Thank you for the question.
So we're throwing the floor open for more questions right now. May I have the mic also run
I
around?
think we've got time for one or two more.
One or two more?
Yeah, he told me I have to step down from the stage in 5 minutes. So.
We've not really had any questions from launch directors and ambassadors. So if there are any launch directors in the room who would like to ask a question, but of course it's open to anybody else to ask a question beyond.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Lancy. I'm a member of Premier, the first chapter in India, and I'm supporting one of the newly launched chapters. My question pertains to primarily my own self, but I think I would like to ask on behalf of everybody. is why should DCs put in so much time and energy into promoting BNI, leaving aside our own businesses?
So I think they're inextricably tied. When you are promoting anything, if you were talking to other people, people get to know you, and as they know you, they start to build a relationship. And if they build a relationship, they're likely to do business. I get this question asked a lot by leadership teams in particular. You know, what's in it for me to run a chapter? Well, you'll be surprised as to what's in it for you. Here's just one example. I had a president who came up to me and he said, you know, sometimes I hear people in my chapter say, why would you want to be on the leadership team? It takes a lot of work. He said, I have the answer for sure. I said, what is it? He said, well, one of the things that we do in our chapter, and we've always done it, is when there's a new leadership team, we always have a photograph taken of the new leadership team, and it goes to a local newspaper, and that local newspaper publishes our photo. It says, here are the new leadership team for this chapter. I said, okay, that's nice. He said, no, wait, it gets better. So my photo was in the local newspaper. I get a phone call from an old college buddy of mine. We went to the university together. And he said, hey, I saw your photo in the paper. I happen to be just in town. He says, I have an office here, but my office is actually, I forget where it was in another state. But I have an office here, and so I was down, I saw the newspaper, I read it, I saw you. So I thought, hey, maybe if you'd like, I'd love to get together, have lunch. He said, sure. They had lunch. Well, the president was a contractor, building contractor. The individual was a developer. He developed property. And so they had lunch. It was very nice. And the developer said, look, the truth is I had an ulterior motive for reaching out to you. He said, we were good friends in university, and I trust you a lot. I watched you in university, and you were very good, and now I see you as a leader in the community. And the truth is, the reason I reached out to you was, we have a development project going here, and I don't have a good contractor to help run this building project. I'd like to talk to you about being the lead contractor for this building project. He ended up getting a multi-million-dollar job because his photograph was in the newspaper because he was on the leadership team. He did such a great job, he now has a long-term contract with this developer to do multiple buildings throughout the entire city. It came because he was on the leadership team. Well, you're on a role better than the leadership team. You're in a role that has an opportunity to meet many people from many different chapters. So I think the thing that is best for director consultants is that you're meeting people, you're showing them how good you are as a business professional, you're helping them in business. I think director consultants have an opportunity to get more business than the average BNI member because they get a lot more exposure. I hope that answers your question. Good. I can do one more question. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Bela. I'm a launch ambassador, come on recently on board. Tell us a bit about future of BNI. I mean, is there something like virtual kind of space, chapters that you are looking at? So kind of intrigued in kind of knowing that.
Sure. So let's talk about the future. Not only of BNI, but just the future in general. But before I talk about the future, let me talk about the past. In business, companies have been disrupted, particularly through technologies. They've been disrupted. Sears, I don't know if Sears was Sears ever in India? No. Okay. Well, Sears was large in many countries. They've filed bankruptcy now in the US. They used to be the largest global retailer, largest retailer in the world. They built their business off a catalog. In the United States, they built it off a catalog. The catalog was huge. And people would order from this catalog, and we're talking about the late 1800s, early 1900s. They would be in a rural area, and they would order out of the catalog. In 1993, they shut down their catalog because they didn't see the future of catalog. Amazon.com opened in 1994. They saw the future of catalog. It was just online. They totally disrupted many businesses. Blockbuster. Did you ever get Blockbuster in India? The video, someone's saying yes. It was the video rental business. Blockbuster was the 600-pound gorilla in the video rental business. At one point, Netflix was struggling, and they asked Blockbuster to buy them out. Blockbuster not only said no, the CEO of Blockbuster said, companies like Netflix aren't even on our radar as competition. Today, Netflix is worth 50 billion US dollars, and Blockbuster is bankrupt. Kodak invented the digital camera. It was Kodak that invented it. But they didn't want to hurt their film industry, their film business, so they licensed out the digital camera business. How'd that work out for them? Kodak is still in business, but barely. So businesses get disrupted. They get disrupted when they get too complacent. And so BNI, I do not want BNI to be complacent. I do believe that there are technologies that could be disruptive to the organization, and we have our eyes on those technologies. But we're probably 5 to 10 years out. We're probably 5 to 10 years out from those technologies really being realistic. I don't think, listen, there have been networks that have been created that did basically Zoom meetings. They've all failed. Every single network that did a Zoom meeting failed. Not BNI groups, but other groups. They didn't work. That two-dimensional engagement is difficult with a group of 30, 50, 100 people. But from my research, here's an example of it. The VP of Linden Labs recently said, Vice President of Research for Linden Labs recently said that within 10 years, mixed reality meetings will be as commonplace as an iPhone. I don't know where my iPhone is. Here it is. Mixed reality meetings will be as commonplace as an iPhone. Meaning some type of three-dimensional interaction with other people will be commonplace, but probably about 10 years out. So imagine Star Wars, where you have the Jedi Knights, and there's like a real Jedi and a holographic Jedi and a couple of real Jedis and another holographic Jedi. That may be the future, and we're watching these kinds of things to see where it goes. By the way, if we ever get to that point, I want to be Obi-Wan Kenobi. So yeah, there's a chance, and I think that we need to be watching that space carefully. I don't want to be Blockbuster saying they're not even on our radar. They are on our radar. What will that look like? I don't know. I don't know yet. I don't think anybody really knows. I'll tell you what I don't want you to do. I don't want you to say, oh, you can Skype in if you can't make a meeting. We need a plan. We need a system. We need a process. And I want you to know we recognize that. And that plan will evolve as the technology evolves. Great question. Thank you very much. So I think I'm out of time. We have people who have their hands up. Are we out of time? Okay, absolute last one, the very back. He's jumping up and down. Last one. Yes, I can. Sort of.
Sir, as a launch director, a certain amount of monotony tends to set in. You've launched one chapter, you've launched a second chapter, you launch a third chapter, you get used to, the same answers that you give. All 3 chapters launched successfully. So how does a launch director, keep himself inspired and break the monotony?
Okay, that's a great question.
Thank you, sir.
I've been doing this 35 years. Do you know how many times I've heard the questions that I've heard here today? Many of them for 35 years. Many of them, not all of them. Many of them. I don't hear how's technology going to affect us in the future a whole lot, but many of them. I think the secret to that is you have got to be passionate about this. If you're not passionate about doing those launches, re-engage yourself. Look for what made you want to do this to begin with. Why did I want to do this? And then immerse yourself in that and recognize that every time you launch a chapter, you're making a difference for people. You're making a huge difference in their life. And don't look at it as you're just going through the same stuff over and over again, because believe me, I get that. I was just in Brazil. I had the same kinds of questions. But the thing is, I'm passionate about pouring into members and directors. If I can help you be successful, my job is good. I love it. So your focus needs to be to pour into people so they can be their best selves, so they can be their most successful. And yeah, they're going to ask the same questions. But you know what? Your answers may change over the years. Mine have. As I've learned new things and gotten better at certain things and seen things done differently, my answers have changed over the years. So my advice is re-engage yourself. And as you tell examples and stories, here's my best recommendation for being a good storyteller. Because if you want to do kickoffs, you got to be a storyteller. You got to tell people about stories that you've observed and that you've heard that have worked in BNI. Don't ever retell a story, relive a story.
Thank you, sir.
So if you can relive that story, it keeps you engaged and passionate. All right, I am told, yes, Elizabeth? Yes, Beth wants to add something.
So I started in BNI as a member, you know, and I became a director at the age of 24. I had the largest region in the company at that time, 17 chapters. So what I would say to remember is, as many times as you have heard the same question, for that group, it's the first time they've asked it, right? And so it's totally fresh. And when you engage with the passion Ivan is talking about,
right,
it's easy to do.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir.
So I would love to take more questions, but I have a promise to go to the Mumbai office. And it takes time to travel here in Mumbai, I've discovered. And so I won't be able to meet the staff in Mumbai unless we leave soon. So that's the reason why. Let me just leave this one thing with you. I really truly believe, and I've said this before, that you are in a position to make a bigger difference in people's lives than anyone else. And so I want to thank you for your commitment to BNI, being director consultants. I do believe that being a director consultant will give you skills to be a better leader. They'll give you opportunities by meeting many, many other people. But more important, I think, is that it also gives you a chance to help other people. And by pouring into other people, then you make a difference in their life. And if you make a difference in their life, they want to help you. What goes around comes around. And you're in the best position to help create that kind of environment. I truly appreciate everything that you do, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. I'm doing a presentation called Who's in Your Room? Oh, I forgot one other thing. Is Mac in the room? So Beth, I've got some networking mentor books. So she'll hold up the networking mentor. I believe right now you can get that book live on Kindle for free. I set it up for me here in India so that it would be free. So if you want a copy of the Networking Mentor, which is really what you guys are doing, you're mentoring people to be successful, I set that up to be free during my trip here in India. So if you go to Amazon.com, and I think you can get it on Amazon.in, I think it is, or IN. I think you can get it there for free as a downloadable. You don't need Kindle to download it. All you need is a computer. You can download it to read on your computer. So if you have a chance, check that out. If you can't get it, let me know so that I don't announce it publicly. Yeah, I don't want to do that. Thank you all very much. They were great questions today. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Dr. Misner. Thank you for sharing about BNI, sharing about yourself as well as your passion. Yeah, we need a standing ovation for sure for Dr. Misner. Really whetted our appetite for tomorrow, sir. Thank you.